Well, I don't think architecture was part of my perspective when I was a child. I wanted to be a vet. I think when I was a child, I was kind of I was doing a lot of horseback riding, so I wanted to do something with animals.
Oh,
And yeah, I think every little girl wants to do something with horses or animals. Or so I wanted to be a vet, and then later on, I wanted to be a journalist. Actually, I think, and then I think when I got out of high school, I was kind of confused. So I really wanted to do something in the arts, and I thought I would go into art school doing sculpture and ceramics, and then I had this scholarship right after high school where I went to Georgia Southern University in the States,
oh wow.
and I did sculpture and ceramics, which was really, really nice, and I enjoyed it a lot. But then, getting back home, I was a little bit in doubt because the education in Denmark is a little more elite. I think the art schools are very, very small, and it's very, very difficult to get in. So I decided to study medicine. And then
That's
so
a quite
kind of a windy road,
yeah.
because my brother was a doctor, and I thought maybe that's also exciting. And I did also a lot of biology in high school. So I studied at med school for half a year, and then it was maybe not so much fun anyway. And then I dropped out, and then I came into architecture school.
That's amazing. So what was the art school that you went to in the United States? Which one was it?
It was at Georgia Southern University.
Okay.
At Statesboro.
Wow.
Statesboro Blues.
Was that your first time visiting or going to the United States?
Yes, it was.
Wow.
It was. It was kind of a culture shock, I think, coming
Sure.
from Scandinavia to the deep south.
Right. Could you from my understanding is that a lot of the Danish learn English from a fairly young age, or it's pretty common, but
Yes.
could you understand the people in the South? Because even for myself, I'm from California,
Yeah.
sometimes the accent is difficult.
No, it's very it's very different. So I kind of, it was also the culture was so different, and going to university, there was these sororities and fraternities and and all this kind of thing that I never knew of. So it was, but the art department was really nice, and I felt at home. But it was, as soon as you got out of the art department, it was very foreign.
That's a pretty bold move. I mean, how old were you when you decided to go to the US to study arts?
I was 18 or something like that, 18, 19. And it was kind of a coincidence, because there was this ad in the newspaper that you could. I think I wanted to go. I just wanted to travel, and maybe my dad manipulated me a little bit, because he saw this ad in the newspaper said, you could apply for a scholarship for a year in university in the States, and then he thought, maybe I should apply for that, and I did, and I got it, and so he was happy, because then I wasn't traveling around the world. So,
He'd rather have you in the southern states of the United States.
yes.
And so after that, though, was there any thought of staying in the U.S.?
No, actually, not really. I didn't have. I think there's. I think for the first time I actually felt this. I had this feeling of if you don't have, if you don't have finances, it's very difficult to make it anyway. And especially in the States. And this feeling of being, at that time there were no internet, no mobile phones, and I was really kind of of course I had a small amount of money from my family, but just you had to have money for doing anything, and it was kind of an eye opener. I think that you check bounced and you were really lost, and this whole feeling of being away from home.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I don't think I was considering staying. Later on, I wanted to go to New York, of course, like everybody else. But not that time, no.
So you come back home, and then you make
Hmm?
the switch to medical school, and your brother
Yes.
was in that kind of field.
Yes.
Were your parents also in that field? Like, what, that seems again a pretty stark transition from sculpture.
Yeah, it was. I mean, but I was always a little bit split. In high school, I was doing both arts and biology, and I was really kind of split between science and art in a way, and because I really do think that science is exciting, and I think I was kind of split, and then my great grandfather and my grandfather was architects, and I think, and my dad was an engineer, and my mom was a textile designer. So
Wow.
I think they kind of felt that you can do art as a hobby, and maybe they also advised me. How you are when you're that age. You just talk to people and you change your mind and so it was like I think my dad, being an engineer, thought that architects were really, really kind of romantic people, and so and I think also he thought that it was a difficult road to go. So maybe he also pushed a little bit, or they pushed me into med school. But it was really, I didn't feel all that much at home.
Was it because you found that medical school just lacked some of the creativity?
Yes, yes. A lot of the discussions, with your peers is about. Yeah, it was kind of difficult. I was also, I was interested in going to art exhibitions and music and concerts and, talking about literature, whatever. It was very difficult to get a conversation with your fellow students. It was like a very sort of, because you have to study a lot. So all conversations was about, the next assignment or the next exam, or
Right.
it was, yeah.
Probably a lot of memorization. Yeah.
Yes, and I don't think I'm sure I'm sure it's really interesting to be a doctor, but I'm not so sure it's so interesting to be, to get there. So,
It's a long path as well. So
yeah,
when you drop out, did you know at that time that you were going to transition to architecture school?
yeah, maybe that was yeah. I thought, okay, I'll try this, and see if it's, if I feel comfortable.
Now, you said your grandfather and great-grandfather were both architects? Yes. I have to ask, did any of them warn you to not go into architecture?
No, because they were both passed away before I even thought about that. So maybe no.
Good. Good. I feel like usually when there's relatives who are architects, they tell their nieces and nephews and their grandkids that maybe choose an easier path.
Yes, that's what my daughter is in architecture school now, and she's
really?
and when she was small, she would say, "I will never become an architect. It's horrible. You work all the time." And then she really tried all kinds of. She went to art school, and then she ended up starting to say that maybe it's two-dimensional. I really want to work more three-dimensional.
Oh, no.
And then she got into architecture school, but I think. Yeah, I guess that, you bring your kids to see stuff, and you discuss, all kinds of stuff at home. And I think that's probably very influential in a way that you don't even know, because I really didn't want her to go be an architect. I thought maybe she should do something much more, science or another kind of art, and find her own path. But then now when she's there, I think it's great. We have so much fun when we go travel.
Yeah.
And she will kind of drag me along, 20 kilometers to see something. And you get lazy when you get older, and she kind of insists on, and that's really a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
That's really
awesome.
cool.
Having a good travel companion. I mean, I think architecture is kind of an odd and interesting profession and thing to study because it's so robust and broad, and there's a lot to it. And it's almost like sometimes I think I could be doing something else with my life, but architecture is so captivating. I think for some folks like myself, once you get hooked, there's not many other professions, dare I say, that are as challenging and as complex, and you get kind of sucked into that, you know.
No, you're absolutely right. I think that's the most. I mean, the deeper you get into architecture, the more you know that you don't know, and the more you want to learn. And I think it's an amazing field, and it's really it's all-consuming. I think, and in that sense, it's wonderful. Also because you have. I mean, even if you go travel somewhere, you see abandoned building, and you want to, you know, all the possibilities you see here, and it in that sense, it's really it's wonderful. Yeah.
It's actually interesting how life is, I feel, because you said you had this kind of duality between the arts and science, and you ended up in architecture, which sounds like it's almost a perfect combination of the technical and the creative, right? Yes. How did you realize that architecture was it? Was there a particular moment?
Well, I think it's probably very it's probably not all that sort of thought through. I think the feeling of being on in the right place, you know, having fun while you do it. And I think that's probably, I mean, of course, it's not fun all the time, but the feeling that, you know, this is really, you know, I feel good when I do this, and I lose myself, and you know, you're stuck for hours, and you realize that, you know, you've been here for a long time, and it's, you know, you just, you know, kind of sucked into it. And I think that's a really good test if you want to know if you want to do something, whether you really feel that it's you know, while you're in it, you're comfortable.
And you had that feeling once you started architecture school.
Yes, yes,
like in the studio, working amongst peers.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, but I think the 80s were, well, it was some sort of late 80s, and there was a lot of confusion around. It was kind of, you know, the 60s. I was at Aarhus Architecture School, and it was kind of a non-professor. There were no professors in the school. It was kind of a school that was started in the 60s, and when we started there were nobody that wanted to teach us things. We had to find out by ourselves, and it was kind of very, in a way, quite confusing. But then on the other hand, you had to find your own way, and I think that's, you know, that's what was also good. I think that you had to find your own way, but there was not a lot of lectures, not a lot of kind of teachers telling you, you know. I remember there was this guy saying, but I would love to learn how to draw, and they would say, you'll learn, you know, you just do it, and this kind of thing, right?
Wait, so did you say there were no professors, or?
No, it was a school with teachers, but no, you know, leading professors.
I see.
It was kind of sort of collective, very 60s. You know?
Okay. I'm quite curious now. So, like, how large was school? Like, how many students were at the school? Was it a 4-year thing, a 5-year program?
It's in Denmark. It's a little bit different from the States, because architecture. There are only 2 schools in Denmark, and they're related to the. They're not related to the educational ministry. They're related to the cultural ministry. So they don't follow the, well, they do now, but they didn't before. They don't follow the kind of university programs. They're more like art schools. And so it's a 5.5-year program.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's pretty long compared to, I think, you know, the system that you have with the bachelor and master.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit different now. It's more you can more relate it to the kind of universal university system with a bachelor and a master, but you still have to do 5.5 years.
And the 5.5 years, now we're just talking about education, but the courses that you're taking and the classes you're taking, are they specifically about architecture only? Or do you have, like in the United States, we have general education, so kids have to take English when they're in college? That's not the case.
No. And I think that's the college system and the university system is also different here, because the high school is more, you can, after the first 9 years or 10 years of education, you can choose to be 9 years or 10 years in the first part of the education, and then you go to something that they have the same notion in Germany. It's called Gymnasium, so it's a 3-year academic preparation, and after Gymnasium you can go to university. If you don't want to be an academic going to university, you take another kind of intermediate education after the first 9 or 10 years.
I see.
Yeah, it's a different system. So you're a little bit older when you get out of high school, but then you're not. Then you go directly to do your bachelor in a specific field. So you don't have these more wider knowledge, you could say, which is good and bad. I mean, I think you get probably you get very good at what you do in one specific field, but maybe there's a lack of sort of a wider education.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, the school that I went to, we had to take GE, so like English was a course I had to take, and philosophy and etc. And at the time, some days it sucks because I'd rather be in an architecture studio. But you know, looking back, I don't regret it. It was actually quite helpful. Because I mean, at that time I was like 19. You know, I probably so you finished school. Did you move right into practicing architecture and working at like an architecture office?
Yes. When I finished in 91, there was a kind of a crisis. So most of us didn't think that we would get a job. So it was like, so what are you going to do? I think I wanted to do theater, stage design and stuff like that. And then I kind of ended up being hired by Henning Larsen's office in Copenhagen. So I moved to Copenhagen and I worked there. First, I actually worked at a smaller office that's not there anymore. And then I worked with Henning Larsen. So I was kind of lucky to get a job, because there was a lot of my peers that had to go to either Germany or Sweden because there were no jobs in Denmark, which was also, I guess, the 90s were also the time where nobody got anything built. It was much more like paper projects that you exhibited somewhere. It was more sort of art related, I guess. And you spend a lot of time creating, paper projects and exhibit and do stuff like that. So while working at Henning Larsen, I would kind of exhibit at at art exhibitions or stuff like that. So it was very different. I think there was this hunger, to actually be able to build something. So of course, just working in an office, you learned a lot, but the mere thought of just getting a building done was in your own name was kind of like not reachable. I
was actually going to ask, during that time period, like what were the architectural movements at that time, just to kind of contextualize?
I guess when I went to architecture school, I think that there was this postmodernist movement, and I was really never into that, and it was kind of it felt very strange because everybody was using their their color pens, you know,
Yeah.
in pink and light blue and gold, and doing all these very postmodern buildings. And so I think that I tried to find something that was that could inspire in a different way, because I really wasn't related in any ways. There was also the rationalist and the postmodernist that were kind of fighting big debates in school, and then but I was kind of I was more I found these Japanese architects in the library that was kind of very ephemeral, very everything was very lightweight and poetic, and so I kind of dig my way into people like Toyo Ito. To me was a big revelation. To see some of his work was amazing. And I mean, only in books. I couldn't go to Japan, but so I think there was then of course came
deconstructivism. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And Eisenman and that was probably not my thing either, but that was kind of the movements. And then and Bernard Chumi and it was also very academic, I guess.
Yeah.
And then of course there was, I guess, modernism came back. But I think there was, I guess, the very academic part of architecture at that time, or very theoretical, was part of nobody being able to build anything, because there was there were no real ambitious clients around. And
I see. That's interesting. I mean, it makes sense, right? That the availability of clients and projects and money for projects would dictate what happens in architecture.
Yes.
Because architects are going to do something. And if they can't build, they're going to do paper stuff.
Yes.
The subject of different architecture movements or camps or styles or approaches, whatever you want to call it, fascinates us, because we do see that it's common, I think in particular, well, for any designer, but maybe younger ones, and especially, to latch on to one of their heroes.
Yes.
And just basically follow in their footsteps. Not that there's anything totally wrong with that, but their work always is basically a derivative of the master's work, whoever the master, is.
Yes.
But it sounds like, and this gets on to your work as well, it sounds like that you were never quite comfortable or settled with doing that. That's a good observation. I think that feeling a little bit misfitting in a way, not being part of a movement. I guess I've always been a little bit critical, I guess. Sure.
Or a little bit like and I think that's so in that sense, trying to develop something that you I guess also a lot of experiments and trying to find your own way, I think is important. I teach it in Mendrisio in Switzerland, and my first semester the students, you have these studios, and you have 24 students, and you have you start up, and they keep on asking you, what do you think I should do? And I'm like, I don't know. No, but it's like so I think for those students it took a while to understand that I didn't have a certain style, but there's certainly a way of thinking. I think a way of relating, of course, to the site and to the kind of wider contextual, economically and socially, and so I think there's to me it's much more about a way of thinking, a way of when you, of course, there's a lot of intuition as well, but when this this you push towards this feeling of getting something that has a natural relationship to of course to the brief or the program, but also to the site and to the the economy or whatever. So in that sense, there's this notion of style is a little bit
superficial,
strange to me, and also it becomes very. I mean, that's probably just a personal thing. I think it becomes very boring for me personally to repeat. You find something that's you think is worthwhile, and then you need to find something else that's also worthwhile. Otherwise, it becomes boring.
Yeah.
And I think part of the drive in the office is to experiment, with materials or with spatial configurations, or so trying something that we haven't tried before is part of the drive, I think. And that's probably just a restless personal thing, but because of course there's a lot of really great architects that are repeating wonderful things in different ways, depending on where they are. And I don't say that that's not great architecture. I certainly do, but it's just not. I lose my motivation, if I repeat something. So yeah.
I think that makes sense. And I think in the exercise of repeating a gesture, like an aesthetic or design gesture too, I think you kind of lose the freedom and maybe the opportunities of things happening that were unexpected in the project.
Yes.
Maybe on a business model aspect, it's better because you know what you're doing, what the product is going to be like you've done it before, right? So it's maybe it's more efficient. But I think if you're interested in something that's a bit more, on the new, creating something new and just creating every time, like that doesn't seem to be able to work.
Yes, I think you're very right. I think that. And I definitely think as a business model, it's much wiser to do that. And even the details you might have, studied and refined. And of course, we try to, in the office to reuse, if you've done a detail or a way of doing something, to learn from that and try to so we don't start all over every time, but I think you're right, and it's and of course people can also your clients know what to expect, and I think that's probably for many clients a good thing that you buy a signature architect and probably what's gonna come out of it, and that's so it's much more insecure for clients to kind of start up with us because they don't actually know what's going to come out of it. So.
Actually, that's a really good point that I want to ask about, because I think there's a lot of ways to talk about this subject, but maybe from one perspective is from the clients, and from a business model, marketing model. Branding is a word that's, the last decade or 15 years or so become very popular, even for architecture offices. And one thought is to, if you're a business or a designer or an architect, to develop a brand, have your thing, whatever that is, whether it be just the graphic representations are the same, maybe the buildings are the same, whatever the thing is. And that is a way to provide or to sell your expertise in that in that thing. I actually don't have a question really, but I suppose, so I guess one question would be like, how do you, I mean, you're established, so you probably don't need to do this, but how do you convince clients to go along for the ride of the unknown when that's kind of what you do?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question. I think that one of the things that we think is very, very important is that they can trust us on technical and economical on the relationship they have with us, that we are actually extremely professional in, keeping the budget, keeping the process, the time process, or keeping we're very proud to say that we haven't had a lawsuit for many, many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Or an insurance insurance case, because we if you look at the people that we have in the office, they're quite a lot older than you would see it at many offices. Very skilled, very experienced. So the teams that are actually doing the detailed drawings, and they even go on building sites and stuff, they're really tough people, and they really know what they're talking about. So I think that's the reason why that is so important to me, is because there's other uncertainties in the design that we do. Since the client doesn't know exactly what's going to come out of it, then he or she should definitely know that it's safe, in the sense of economy, in the sense of the technical standards. And I think that's helped us a lot, especially lately, because of course, when you start an office, you're really inexperienced, and a lot of mistakes can happen, and I think so that was one of the things that we've been discussing a lot, is to we don't want technical mistakes here. It's just not possible. So because that's not a brand you want. Like you buy something and it's kind of falling apart just because it's kind of artsy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah, that's interesting. And there's maybe sort of the drawing parallels to the art and the science aspects of your background. But what you're saying makes total sense, because for most clients, if they can be told, as you said, that the budget will be okay and that the building's going to perform, those are probably the biggest concerns realistically for most clients. Yeah,
Yes.
And okay, cool. If that's taken care of, then please go ahead, come up with something cool. If I feel confidence in that other aspect, that's great.
Yes.
So just before we were talking about the work and your work being varied, which I think it is. Mm-hmm. What things would you say are consistent between the different projects, and aside from the fact that they are technically sound, and they're responsible economically?
Well, I think it's again about the way we think in the office, the way we kind of approach an assignment. It has very much to do, I guess, again, a mixture of intuition and kind of sensitivity, and kind of interest in materiality, and then on the other hand, a very sort of thorough analysis on the site, which is both a formal analysis, but also an understanding of what are the premises here. So if we are in Greenland, I would never say that I understood the Greenlandic culture, but I certainly know everything about the small town that we are building in, and I know about the social issues. I know about the geology and on the site, and so we kind of try to collect information. Sort of course, they're different from the different sites. What is important? How do we prioritize our analysis and our collection of information? But we do spend a lot of time trying to understand where we are. So that's in a way the basis of the design process. So when you have this kind of basic knowledge or basis, then we start to work more intuitively, because I think that's, to me, I think the most important thing is, when we manage to make a building that feels like it's underlining the qualities that are already there. I think we did a good job, and I think if you look at the Warden C Center, everybody, one of the best compliments I had was that somebody said, yes, of course it should look like that. and I think that's so this kind of natural connection to the site is kind of a goal. Yeah.
Interesting. I find that one of the misconceptions I think maybe non-designers or students have about the research phase, as you're describing it, is that it's, it sounds boring. It sounds like it's not a creative or conceptual part of the process, or that it is not conceptual or creative. But I think based on what you're saying, it's quite the opposite, that actually it's extremely creative and conceptual if you approach it that way.
Yeah. I think that's you're talking about architecture being an amazing field to work in, is that the frame that you create around the creative process, and I think the more precise that frame is, the better the more kind of creative work you can do. I think these kind of sites where everything is perfect is very difficult, because anything can happen, and you don't really know, what is the right answer here. And I think that so if there's no problems to solve, at least you have to create some problems to solve.
Go back to that paper architecture. What were we doing there? So you're practicing at that first office. Did you start your office right after that one, or did you work at other firms as well?
No, I was working with Henning Larsen for 5 years, and then together with a colleague of Henning Larsen, we created a small office. It was actually only me and him. And then we did competitions. And I think at that time we were very lucky that you could, as a new office, get invited for competitions. So we actually won 3 competitions, in the first year. Wow. And then problems started, because we only got one of the buildings built. And I think he was a little bit old, and I think he expected also to be able to make a living that was fair. And I was kind of, I was teaching, so I had a little bit of money from the teaching job, and I could survive on that. And I just wanted to keep on going. And so we split up in after 3 years, and then I started my own, and I got lucky because there was this competition or interview competition, then I think the fee was really bad, and I didn't probably understand how bad that was. So nobody else wanted the project. No, so we got that. It was only me and one. I had one person employed, and then we got that project, and then we started doing that right away. I think when the office started, wow. And then we got another one, and then I think we were really struggling for a long time, because getting into competitions, it was really difficult. It was kind of the EU or the European Union kind of codes that suddenly, with competition, so it became very, very difficult to get into competitions, because you had to have, either kindergarten or whatever you tried to apply for, you had to done so and so many before and stuff like that. So that was a little bit difficult. So I think, it's for a long time kind of struggled. And then we were lucky that the municipality at that time had Copenhagen, the city architect of Copenhagen, was kind of interested in helping young architects. So he in a way pushed for, the small projects like kindergartens or smaller projects to get young architects to do them. And we did 2 kindergartens. and it's not, this is not what happens today because it's very different. It's kind of they have kind of deals with teams that do all the kindergarten. Yeah. So it's not so much fun, but so in that case, and then I guess 2008 was here in Denmark really a tough time. Suddenly there was a really big bubble. That was not so bad in Sweden and Norway, but here in Denmark was really bad because of the crash in the States also, of course. Yeah. So that was a tough one, and so the office I had to let half the people go, and I think it has taken us quite a long time to move from 2008, and then actually sort of like 7-8 years ago, we kind of I think it loosened up, and then I was wise enough, I think, to hire a CEO who's not an architect, and he's also a partner now in the office, and in a way he professionalized a lot, both the kind of processes and fees and contracts and all that, and so that has been I think been quite important for me also to instead of trying to manage everything, only to do the design part of the office, and that I think that's also helped the office.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So this kind of professionalizing and getting people in that are really good at what they do, and then and doing things that I'm not good at doing, and then now I'm doing what I'm good at, So.
Right. So when you started off, it was started with competitions, and you mentioned one of the 3 got built, the other 2 did not.
Yeah. And
then when you broke off on your own, you also did competitions, got a few kindergartens. So I don't know how large those projects are, but Did you have to, when you would win these competitions kind of throughout the early career, did you have to hire people on to execute the work? Because from talking to other architects who do large scale work, that seems to be sort of the process.
Yeah. No, I think the Danish, I had to hire people in, but I didn't hire other officers to do the work. So, so we did all the work in the office. 20 years ago, you could still do drawings by hand. Of course, AutoCAD was in, but for small projects, you could actually do them by hand and do also the detailing drawings by hand. So the whole setup with the sort of technical part of the office was not as advanced as now. So what I did was I hired some quite experienced people. And then, also I learned a lot myself in detailing and describing and going on building sites and stuff. I think today it's a little bit more difficult to do that. I think you need more people in the office, and I think you need more skills. I think you need more also more technical equipment, and people have to be able to do Revit. We do everything in this in Revit. I can't even draw on a computer, so it's kind of, I could never start an office again because it's like but I still actually, do you remember these parallel
parallel rules, May lines?
Yeah. May lines, exactly. I have one on my table, and there was this young architect asking me, what is that machine you have?
What is that machine? This archaic...
I do everything on that machine.
Yeah. Do you still use a May line?
Yeah.
No kidding.
I love it. Yeah, I do.
That's awesome. It's as we said before in the show, I don't know if it was the case for you, Marina, but I had to use a May line when I was in school, the first few years. And there is something kind of cathartic about using the parallel rule and a triangle and you're drawing and there's something
I had one. It was
I
a
like
little
the
portable
sound when
one.
Yeah, the sound.
you had a portable one.
It was like
That's
a cheapy one,
advanced.
but it was good. You could take it with you places. It was pretty handy.
Yeah.
The trick though is
Nice.
at the bottom of the parallel the rule, did it have ball bearings?
Nah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Oh wow, you didn't have ball bearings. That's
I had a. You didn't have in the mobile one, right?
No.
No. So no, but I love this one. It's I think actually it's more advanced than the mainline. It has these ball bearings and it's black and
Wow.
it's really, I love it, and I love the sound when you work fast and you can hear when you turn your sometimes it's faster but I do of course a lot of things just by freehand. And I think you get to know exactly what a meter is on freehand, right? And if you have the people that only work on the computer, they don't know. It's quite difficult for them to sketch kind of freely because it's really not part of their daily life. And I think that's there's something I'm not I love all these I love Revit, I love all that. I think it's great, but there's a sense of scale I think that you lose with the computer altogether. And I think there's going from 2D to 3D, I think there's also an understanding of these kind of simple tools that a section and a plan. There's really a lot of young people that are very, very bad at doing plans.
I agree. Yeah. It's an odd thing because you kind of assume, okay, well, if we're talking about hand sketching, freehand, or using a mainline, and you're doing on a piece of trace paper, it's blank white space. You have a pen or pencil. What's the difference between that and then in AutoCAD or Revit when you're drafting 2D? But there's a huge difference. There's a huge difference. There's a loss of scale. There's not the flexibility to quickly look at things in multiple views.
Exactly.
Do like half thought sketches. You can't do that in a computer. It's all or nothing, and it's very choppy.
No, you're absolutely right, and I think there's a kind of rapid way of understanding what you're doing, and you put your tracing paper on top of, and then you kind of make the bathroom a little bit smaller to be banal. But then you can do that in a very rapid way, and sometimes with the colleagues here in the office, and I ask them, so why does that bathroom look like that? And it's like, oh, it's just a block I took.
It's a term
somewhere. So there's this kind of strange abstraction in a way. And but I guess it's just different times. But I really think a nice plan, where everything is working, and there's 20, you can take off 20 centimeters and it works totally different, right? Anyway, that's an old woman talking.
I mean, I do think it's fascinating. So real quick, because we're on the subject. So when you're using the mainline, what other tools are you? Is it yellow trace, white trace? What kind of pens and pencils?
It's white trace. When I was young, the nicest thing you could have was the American yellow trace. So if we knew somebody going to New York, we would ask them to buy American trace paper. But actually, to be honest, the Finnish manifold I think is the best. It's very, very thin and very strong. So that's what I use.
That's awesome. So going back to the story, so competitions so actually one question I want to ask was, if large scale work was always the primary interest and focus for you, or was there ever a time when much smaller projects like a single family house specifically was more on your radar?
Yeah, I think doing single family houses are great. It's wonderful. I have done a few. The thing is that it's actually very, very difficult to because it's very difficult to do when you have a larger office to do, single family houses, because you need this kind of very close relationship to the client, and you need to, take your time, and the client has to understand that, the fee is quite large compared to, if you just buy a type house or so there's and I think to us we've tried to say, can we do some of the single family houses, and they all, it doesn't seem to work for us as an office, but I think it's very nice to do. And also I think doing housing altogether is really, really a nice task. The thing is just that the market is so somehow making everything banal, because you need to repeat. If you work with commercial developers, the end result, the quality of that is not worth it, to be honest.
Really?
So I think the it's not that we haven't done, and it's not that we don't like our clients, but it's just that, you need to have a very special client doing housing, and they have to be ambitious, and they have to really want quality, and not just repeating kind of 3-room apartment with a bathroom and a blah blah blah. And I think that's there's a few clients that really wants to kind of reconfigure, what is a home and what is an apartment. How do we, could we create more community around this? And they're of course interesting, but they're just not a lot of them.
Yeah, that was something that we had experienced back when we were working and living in New York City. We'd work on these housing tower projects that were done by developers, and fortunate that there's some good clients for sure. But the most of them that we had experienced through us or our peers were kind of what you're describing. It becomes very formulaic. It's like, okay, floor to ceiling glass. This is the layout. And and it's maximize, and
really the only places where you could do some sort of design and something kind of interesting is, the lobby and the amenities.
Yes.
But the actual residences where people are going to spend most of their time, it's kind of like the baseline, very vanilla in the approach, just to appeal to everybody. And at this point, you're just maybe just a technician to a developer, but you're not what an architect should.
Well, the whole
be,
market-driven aspect of it is tough.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, it is. It is really, and I think that's. It's not to sound arrogant or, it's just that when you are an architect, and I know that sometimes you don't have a choice, you need to take on projects that that might not be all that interesting, but there is I think a possibility to say no. And I think that's a very egoistic and very personal thing, is that, your life is short. And architecture is a kind of a long-term thing. So when you work like 2 years on a project, that's not really satisfying.
Yeah.
It's like 2 years of your life.
Yeah.
And I personally, I lose my motivation. Yeah. And I think most architects lose motivation. So it's like, why not do something else?
Yeah, I think you could start like even losing your what you believe in architecture, and that's kind of a dangerous edge to be on, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there a particular type of project that you have not done yet that you would like to do?
Well, actually, I've always wanted to do a hotel, but and actually we have one on post. That post will, when COVID started, because of course nobody want to continue a hotel when COVID's there. But and I think that was a lot of that was interesting to do. But I think in a way all projects can be interesting. I think it really depends on the client. Working with an ambitious client is the kind of, I think it's more like, working with really, really nice, ambitious clients are kind of our success criteria. I think this is what we go for. Actually, we just lost London School of Economics. We were in a competition there. Oh. We lost it to David Chipperfield, and that was a project I really wanted to do.
Well, we got to talk to David Chipperfield and be like,
if you have him on the show, let's
hey, come on, you have so much, give it. No,
I'm sure he'll be okay with it.
Yeah.
So I'm a great admirer of David Chipperfield, but I think education is also really interesting to do, because it's I think everything that has a communal influence is nice and interesting.
Yeah, no, for sure. Is it more complicated to apply to this competition when they are outside of Denmark? Like, is the process any different? Is there even more competition if it's open to worldwide architects?
There's. I mean, London School of Economics. Usually when we work in other places in Europe, we would join a local office.
Okay.
So what we do is that we work now in Berlin with the Exile Museum, and we work with a local office that so we do a kind of a joint venture. And I think it's probably important, because building codes, everything is different, and you need to understand that that there are things that you are not able to do professionally. So you need to find some really good collaborators where you are. Yeah, but I think one of the things that's important to us is that we have this sort of full design
authority.
Yeah, and also that we kind of follow on the detailing, because it's very much part of what we do is also in the details, I guess. Yeah.
It's an odd thing, because I know there's some more than I care to think about, architecture offices who do the design and they kind of stop at DD. Design development phase. I don't know if you have the same, and then they kind of hand off CDs to the local architect, and the local architect's needed, as for the reasons you described, but it always seemed crazy to me that you would leave all of the detailing to someone else.
Yeah, you've seen some really bad examples on that. I think you could see some from really good architects, and it's been taken over by a local architect, and some of them are good and some of them are not good.
Right.
But I think also somehow the developer gets too much, or the contractor gets too much power, because it's difficult. So I think that's one of the when we do the contracts with the local offices, we would always kind of insist on being able to be. We do the principal detailing, and they will do everything that has to do with coding, or with the technical demands. Working in Germany, you have different technical demands than here. So we kind of listen very much, and they also do a lot of work. But the kind of main design, I think, is important to kind of stick on to, because otherwise you don't know what. How it will end.
Yeah, I mean, if you imagine, I don't know, you take a Mies van der Rohe building and you give it to a local traditional architect that puts a bunch of trim everywhere. Yes. That's not gonna look good.
Well, that would be an extreme. Yeah.
No, but
that's a great example.
It looks like a nightmare.
So you think you're Mies van der Rohe? Is that what you're saying?
No, but there needs to be some sort of alignment, I think, in the design and understanding, and if for sure the details also make the building. So it's very important.
Are competitions?
It is.
Are competitions the main way that you guys still get work, or is it?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, it is actually, and it's really tough. I think.
Yeah.
No, I think we we kind of try to keep track of how many of how much of the turnover in the office is from kind of from competitions and how much. And I think it's from every year it kind of changes, but it's like 60% from competitions and 40% from. I mean, we're lucky now to have some clients that that we have repeatedly, some really good clients, and that's important. But I think at least 60% is from competitions, and it means that you have to. Yeah, in Europe, it's like you don't get a fee that is equivalent with the work that you do. So, especially in Germany, you would have to. You do the competition, you'll kind of pay a lot of money to be in, and you'll lose, of course. Also, I mean, sometimes you win, but most times you lose, and it's really a balance because, of course, there's something with the we try to put in, we really try to now to choose the competitions that we want to attend because. It's an investment every time. I mean, both with energy but also money wise. So it's.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, no, because I think some of the European competitions also the demands are so high. You would need to do sustainability, LCA calculations. Acoustic. Right now, we're attending a competition on a arena in Denmark, and we have to do acoustic simulations and wind simulations and calculations on so it's really a big job to do. And I think we only attended a few competitions in the States, and I think they were very fair. I mean the fees were so much higher. They were sort of almost paying our almost not altogether, but they were so much more fair compared to the work that you have to do. And I think here in Europe, it's like the tradition is that you paid like, I don't know, 10,000 euros, and you will kind of spend 5 or 6 times as much.
Right, just to enter the competition.
Yeah.
That's a huge investment.
And so what is generally speaking, like what is the win to lose ratio? Because I've always felt competitions were, like you enter a competition to win, especially if you're in office, but like, for example, for students who are entering competitions, I tell them like, realistically, you have to understand you might not, you probably won't. And that not because it's not a good design. It's just because of other things.
Yes. I think, I mean, it differs a little bit, but a 1 to 5 ratio is probably quite true. Sometimes, you get into these really nice waves where you win all the time, and then you lose a lot afterwards. So it's but I mean, the competitions are, of course, also developing things in the office, and they keep you sharp, and I think they're important in that sense. It's kind of a certain competency to kind of develop in this kind of speed that you need to develop in when you do competitions. So it's also important, I think, for the office. But there's there's good and bad, and I know that when you talk to people in the States, they wish there were more competitions because it's very difficult to and I can understand that, and I think that's competitions are important, but I think that the demands in Europe now for competitions are just ridiculous, especially here in Scandinavia. I think they're becoming far out in a way. Yeah.
So do they typically invite, I mean, if the client, I guess, right, is hosting a competition and they are paying some amount of money to these architects, there must be a limit to how many they invite. Is it usually like half a dozen or something? Usually
it's 5.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so it differs a little bit. In Germany, they would sometimes invite 30,
Wow.
but then the expectations of so it's they would do kind of 30, maybe 10. Then the expectations are not as high, so you don't have to deliver as much, which is I quite like in a way. But I mean, we don't attend competitions with 30 attendants because it's a lot. It's a lottery.
Competitions are interesting things. There's this double-edged sword where they boost creativity and allow you to kind of think through your own ideas, but it's like it just costs a massive amount of resources for an office.
And energy. I mean, I guess I still get extremely disappointed when I lose. It's like it takes me days to get over losing, and like my partner says, it's really a bad day when Dorte has lost a competition. Then she's really not nice to be around. And it's terrible. I keep on being like that. But
Well, I think if you care about what you do, it's a good sign in a way. It means like you're still sensitive to what you do and being successful.
It's crazy that some of the proposals have to be as developed as you described. I mean, I'm not so familiar with this space that we're talking about, so I always assumed that the competition proposals were kept at concept design-ish level and not any further, but that's not the case, I guess.
I mean, they used to, but I think they're becoming much more. The clients, they want to make sure, that the economy is, the budget is right. And so, I mean, just, you calculate and I think the sustainability calculations are also really, there's a lot of work to do also for the engineers. And it's like, in the old days, you could do like plan and section and maybe a facade.
Yeah.
No, of course there was a facade, but it was kind of much more about the conceptual idea. And so, but it's very different, I think, now.
I think that points to the larger idea that I think architecture in general has become much more complicated on the technical side. I mean, construction document sets now, we've heard repeatedly from everyone we know, a CD set for a house, let's say, a custom house, is like 10 times thicker or 20 times thicker than it was before. And some architects, they say to the younger designers, like, I don't know how you'd start an office today because the amount of skill you need within the office, the technical side, is just massive.
Yeah, it's true. It's it is massive, and that's why you need, and that's a little bit of a pity. I think that you need to have a certain amount of people in the office now to be able to actually have the skills within the office. So I think there's we have like people that are experts in life cycle analysis and keeping updating on materials and how to calculate and I think that's it's very difficult to be like a 10 or 20 person office like the good old days because it's very difficult to have that knowledge within 20 people and in a way it's very different it's very different. I don't know. I think here what we see is a lot of the offices are bought by big engineering companies. So you have like some very large engineering companies buying up these also quite good offices. So
buying architecture offices.
Yeah, they are. So it's kind of there are these really, really big players now. I think, I mean, in the States, of course, you have these really large architectural offices. But here you now have offices that are kind of turnkey offices, right? They can deliver everything. Architecture, engineering, whatever you need. And it seems like there's this kind of division coming from the sort of bespoke offices like this one, or this more artistic offices, and then the really, really large sort of machines, very professional, of course, but also very impersonal and very sort of, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know of large architecture offices who buy out other architecture offices for various reasons. Maybe the small office has an expertise in stadium design or something. But I would imagine that if an engineering firm buys an architecture office, that it tends to be the leadership kind of defines the spirit of everything down below it, right? So if it starts off as an engineering office, my bet would be that the design work would be, I don't know how you put it, impersonal or more from an engineer's perspective.
Yeah, I guess it's, I mean, there's the larger, one of the big engineering offices, Rambøll, bought Henning Larsen last year.
Wow.
And I think they're trying to, until now, they've kind of tried to keep them divided, but, you know, you never know what's going to happen in 5 years.
Yeah.
You know, and I think the Covey, which is also another big Danish engineering company, bought Arkitema, which was a more commercial office than Henning Larsen. But it seems like, actually a lot of them are being bought. I mean, offices down to, 20, 30 people. So it's, it's kind of strange, a little bit frightening, I guess.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
And so your office, you guys are located in Copenhagen, correct?
Yes.
I think one of the things that we're interested in is that I've never been to Copenhagen. I've never been to Denmark.
Either. Although we have a very good friend who just moved there. So now we have even more of a reason to go.
Please wait until the summer because it's much nicer.
So that's kind of to say that we don't know a whole lot about it. I was wondering,
but we hear a lot about Copenhagen,
from architects,
and how awesome of a place it is, and how big it seems to be as an architecture city. I don't know if it's because of the school programs that they have there and all the international students going there, for their exchange program. But it seems that there is a very strong architecture culture in Copenhagen. So we're a little bit curious.
Yeah, is that like a discernible thing? And how architecture is perceived and thought of in Denmark maybe different than in other places like the United States, for example?
Yeah, I guess it's a number of things. I think there's been one of the important things, I think, was Copenhagen was a very poor city in the 80s and 90s. And then there was, I think there was kind of an economic boost. And at that time, I think the municipality was in a way thinking that they could, because, slowly the economy went up and they could gain from that by having a very strong city architect that pushed, architecture. That was the same architect that would say, let young architects build the kindergartens and so forth. And he was, there was some, Copenhagen municipality owned some sites and they had influence on the sites. So they would say, you cannot build here if you're not using a good architect. Come back with another project with a better architect. Otherwise, you can't get, you can't get approved. And I think that was extremely important because suddenly also the very commercial developers had to bring on a good architect to be able to be approved. And I think that's been one of the very important things about Copenhagen is that the municipality, the city architect of that time was kind of pushing a new method of influencing new developments. And then I think there's the new developments in Ørestad in the North Harbor and the South Harbor that was actually financing the metro or selling off these sites that was owned by the municipality was financing the metro. And they kind of made these organizations around it. So they started doing competitions on every side and, insisting on architecture was important for the developer to be able to actually buy the site. So So I think that was kind of quite clever. And then they started doing the sort of the architecture policy of Copenhagen, which was, in a way, approved by the politicians on a very wide basis. So that was kind of a basic thing to stand on for the municipality to approve new projects. So, there were really kind of extensive plans on how to develop Copenhagen, and the new developments were very sort of strictly monitored.
Mm.
So I think that has been important. I think, prioritizing on public space and prioritizing on, I guess, makes also a more awareness kind of in the public. I mean, not just with architects. So I think, and then of course there's there's a kind of design awareness. I think in Scandinavia altogether, I guess, which is maybe more superficial, which is more kind of lifestyle oriented, but I think there is kind of a general design awareness. I don't know whether it's because we have such bad weather in the winter that you need to be indoors and it needs to be nice and cozy and all that stuff. But there is an awareness generally. So there's also public involvement. There's a lot of if there was if there's a project that people don't want to get built, they really they really gather. They make all these Facebook groups and they put pressure on the politicians and stuff like that. So but I mean, of course, there's a lot of things you could also criticize about the new developments, but the quality is quite high, and I think the in a way bringing design as a way of controlling the capital or the developers, I think is a quite a clever thing to do. You want the site, you want to earn this money to get this site, you need to bring in good architecture.
Yeah,
that's interesting. I had no idea that was the case. It makes a lot of sense. I kind of wish some of that mentality would
exist
be
in other
embodied
places.
in other places.
Yes.
Because otherwise it is the capital that drives just everything.
Yes.
And you get these kinds of things.
Yeah.
Or
and of course.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No. No, but of course, you need. I mean, to be able to control that, you need the politicians to support you, I guess.
Yeah.
So for the municipality to be able to control the quality of architecture, they need to have politicians to support that. Otherwise, so it all comes back to politics, I guess.
Well, it's funny because this is something I've said maybe like a dozen times on the show, and I'm going to keep saying it, is I do think that would be great to have more architects or people who are educated in architecture and practice for a bit and have the kind of broad perspective and the morals that kind of we all share, for them to leave architecture and then basically go into politics and become a city leader of sorts.
Yeah.
Why don't you do it?
I'm not
No. Yeah, you should.
I don't think so. I'm not gonna. But I mean, I say that jokingly, but I think actually that would make a huge difference. And this maybe sounds kind of egotistical or self-righteous for the profession, but I do think that there's some really good people within the architecture community, and if we could get some in kind of higher places to actually make impact in that way, that would be significant.
It really, and I think also I guess pushing for city architects, city architects having influence, or city architect departments having influence. I mean, it is really. I think also planning is a competency that I think we've also lost a little bit here. I mean, just plain old-fashioned city planning, right? There's a tendency in a way to plan in a more aesthetical way, but there's also issues that doesn't have to do with aesthetics that are important. And I think as an education, we have lost it a little bit here. I don't know how it is in the States, but the idea of that competency is more has been lost for some years because nobody has been interested in city planning. But it's also really an important thing. But it's not as aesthetically. It's not so much about form and shape and design, but it's about how do you make good cities. Density, logistics, and so forth, right?
Yeah. Well, here it's I don't know how the situation is for you guys in Denmark, but like the building code and like the zoning code, all of the regulation and restrictions you have to follow in order for your building to be allowed to be built and approved is sometimes a little discouraging, honestly. And I think that's
even from a planning scale too.
Yeah.
It's funny. We talked to a couple of landscape architects or folks that deal with larger scale planning issues, and the number one person they always mention as having issues with is the traffic engineer. And it makes me laugh because it's always that specific. The traffic engineer. I think in the academic space, I don't know. I've only seen a handful of schools, but there's a tendency, I think, for sure, within architecture schools and even the profession, for it to focus so much on the human scale space, form, materials, textures, the sculptures of it, that you forget the other aspects of basically the context, which is the city and what it means to be in a city.
I think that's true. When I guess that was probably also something that happened in the 80s, that you started to like sort of Gordon Cullen old-fashioned townscaping or there's more this kind of master planning, I guess, which was I guess the neo-rationalists were kind of trying to reinvent the historic European city, but in a very superficial way, I would say, because it was all about shape and form and color, and it really wasn't so much dealing with. I guess there's something that I think is really important when you talk about diversity in cities, is that you plan for different economics and different social groups, right? It has to be available for people on different with different economic and social resources. Otherwise, you could plan a new neighborhood and you could wish for it to be really lively, but in the end, you just have kind of the same kind of people all over the place, and I think that's that kind of planning, which is not to do with form, but much more about economic and social structures. I think is kind of forgotten a little bit. I know that it's not kind of a thing that's forgotten everywhere, but here in Denmark, it's not really a discussion anymore, and I think that's it's a loss in a way. But we can take up the discussion, of course. Okay.
So it's an interesting thing because there is a high demand in the States, in California or even New York, for like low-income housing projects, and a lot of firms want to do these projects because you're helping the cause, you get maybe some publicity, you maybe could do something interesting. But I think that's where, if there was an architect in the city that was trying to think about those projects a little bit differently and maybe pushing whoever is selected to try and do them differently, it would be more interesting. Right now, they all look the same. They all look sad, technically and detail-wise. You can tell there was no budget. And, if you look at those projects built today in 2022, and you look at the ones that were built in the 70s when there was also a housing crisis, they're not far apart. I mean, the scale might be better, but they're not going to last well in time, and they're going to become an issue in 10 years from now. So I think instead of putting a Band-Aid on things, we just need to really like be addressing the issues differently, you know?
Yes. I think you're absolutely right. I think that you know, they actually do look a bit like the 70s, but in a different way. But it's also the case here, and I guess it's not really sustainable, you could say, because it's really not sustainable. And I think there's that's definitely an issue. I think we could keep on going on this, but you know, we have these housing blocks from the 60s that are actually quite nicely built and actually quite large, nice apartments that is good quality, and they're tearing them down, half of them to in a way mix the area with private housing to make it more diverse socially. And I think, you know, the idea is good, but it's not a good idea to tear down anything right now, right? I mean, why not do something else? But I think the way we do social housing is also in really, really big batches. And so automatically we create these areas that you know, is very uniform economically, socially, aesthetically. So this, you know, investigation into how to actually mix social housing with private housing in a different way in the city existing city fabric, I think it's also to do with that everything is built in these big batches. It's like nobody can invest in anything unless it's 100 units or 200 units. Or, and Okay, I can keep on going.
No. It's a very good point. I mean, I would say that I think I used to teach for a bit undergraduate architecture students, and maybe it's the ones I saw, but it seems like that generation are, you know, they're deeply aware of the issues of social equity in the cities they create or the neighborhoods they help create with their architecture. So I'm hopeful. I think that there's going to be a new generation who are very conscious of this, and you know, I've seen a number of times students who are deeply concerned with these issues kind of wonder, okay, well, what good can my single building do to help address these things? I'm like, well, it can do a lot, but you know, if you step outside and you start to get into public policy, which is basically urban design, well, then you can impact things in a real serious way.
Yeah, but I think that's interesting because there is a new generation, and they do have much higher ethics, I think, than you know, 10 or 20 years back. And I think that's it's very interesting, you know, what they're gonna achieve. And I think they're also kind of anti-materialistic. I mean, of course, not all of them, but there are kind of a tendency, you know, towards it's not very, they're not really very material, and I think that's great, and they really want to do good. And of course, you can get disappointed, but I think that there's been a couple of generations that has been much more involved with, you know, personal issues. Personal not issues, I know, but you know,
the social issues.
And I think that's it's interesting, and I really hope that they will change also the way that we, you know, that architects also are starting to debate and discuss, and I think there's kind of an ethic that we also forgot for many years. It's not been trendy to talk about ethics as architects for a long time. I think there's been, you know, this kind of buying in on, you know, architecture being a commercial field hasn't been discussed, and I think it's maybe time now that we start to discuss, you know, can we do anything as long as we do good architecture, or can we also demand that there's a more ethic thought to what we do?
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see what happens with these younger kids. But the focus and the sincere passion is there, and the concern is there for them out of necessity, I think, partially. Was there ever a thought that you would start a practice or move and be outside of Denmark?
No. No.
It's too good.
No, actually, no. I was a single mom, and in a way, I think I couldn't really overview moving, with a kid, and so for personal reasons, I think no, that was never sort of on the table.
And how big is your office today?
We are 85.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a lot of people to feed.
A lot of people to feed.
You have 85 children, basically.
Yeah.
Yes.
So talking about the structure of the office, so you had mentioned that maybe 8 years or so, 7 or 8 years ago, you hired a CEO separate from yourself, and that was a big change. Are you involved with the design of every single project, or how is the office structured? Is another way to put it, I guess.
We reach a kind of a level now with the 85 people where we need to somehow restructure a little bit. But until now, I've been involved in all projects. Of course, very much with the beginning and the competitions, and then we've always had a design meeting every week. On all projects, all the way to the, to tender. So, and that, of course, I've also been working a lot, many hours. And now I think we're discussing a little bit, maybe put more time in the beginning. And then there are actually people that are really great designers in the office, to use a little bit less time in the end. And let some of the younger people take over, but that's a discussion, So that's not an official thing.
Are you thinking that the office is gonna grow a bit more?
Well, we don't want it to grow more than not a lot more, because there's a limit, for this to be an experimental or personal office. And I think we don't know exactly what the limit is, but I think you're probably not more than 100, and that's it, because then you start to do something that's less personal, I would say, and maybe also less
cohesive. Yeah, I could see. Well, we've worked at offices of all size, from 3 people to like 200 and
400.
You can tell as an employee too that the office spine or structure or skeleton just starts to kind of like grow its own thing.
No, at some point it's not one office. You have like 5 offices that are sharing a space.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not the kind of way we want to go. And I think that's so we've been discussing it a lot, but I think size is not a criteria, a success criteria to us. But we realized that we need to be a certain amount of people to be able to have the skills within the office to be able to actually meet the demands of today. So there's also a limit to how few we can be, but there's definitely a limit to how many we can be. So we think it's around 100 on the top level, and I think we think it's about 50 on the bottom.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember hearing at one point, I don't know if it's true, but I guess the human mind, the average human mind, can only actually handle, I think it was 150 or 130 people in their database as like a immediate proximity. Beyond that number, it's too many people, and then people become faceless after the 130 or the 150. Yeah. So maybe the 100 is kind of around that vicinity. Who knows?
Yeah, because you have family too. You want to, recognize, right?
Is how many projects do you guys have going on at any one given moment?
Yeah, right now we have a couple of competitions. On one hand, we have 3 really quite large projects, and we have then there's always these projects that are maybe starting up,
Right.
not maybe closing off. There's some building sites also that we attend also to, or we tend to. So I would say, 7 to 10?
That's interesting.
Something like that. Yeah.
It's so interesting because for offices who do single family work, you find that usually the ratio is the total opposite.
Yeah.
Well, they'll have like 15 projects for like 5 employees.
Yeah.
Where the scale is.
Yeah, no, of
very
course.
much different.
Yeah.
And then, so do you have like a dedicated design team and department within the office, or is everybody to a certain degree having multiple hats being worn?
No, I mean, there are some that have more hats than others, but we do have a dedicated design team that are mainly doing competitions and sort of the initial phases. Because again, I think the skills that you need to have to be a real professional today, you cannot both be doing competitions and do detailed drawings.
Yeah.
It's actually not possible. So you also get, you get rusty at a time when you, sometimes if we had too many competitions and it's like, hey, you want to do a competition again? And most people feel too insecure to go back to that phase. And of course, some of the younger architects are not able to do detailed drawings. So no, it is very much kind of the design part of the bus, we call it. And then there's the kind of the project teams. So of course, everything is organized around project teams, and then you have the specialists and the experts, the facade experts or sustainability experts, and that kind of in and out of different projects. Yeah,
that makes sense. And it seems like for most architects, at least after 10 or so years, they kind of naturally gravitate toward one of those positions or a few that they're most comfortable with. Yeah.
And I think it's one of the things that's probably something, in school or in architecture school, we talk very much about the creative part of being an architect, but there's so many different positions that you can take being an architect. And I guess, project manager usually doesn't do any drawings anymore, but it's such an important part of, pushing a project. So there's so many positions you can take. You don't have to be a wonderfully talented designer to be a really important part of an office. So, and I think we in a way we need to also because they can't all be designers, and I don't think they should be.
Yeah.
And there's so many skills that are needed, and in that sense, it's great to find your place in this machine or in this in this space of architecture.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good point, because if I think back about the time I was in school, and you have like some good friends that clearly are not good designers,
Yes.
and that they get judged on the work that they produce, and unfortunately it's just not working out for them. Well, how many of them are quitting architecture because of that, when maybe they could have been great project manager or sustainability specialist, or like just find their niche in that space. And maybe that's where school should explain those different roles and positions that are available to students, because it's kind of a shame. They came to architecture for a reason, and it seems like leaving it because they're not a good designer might not be the reason.
Yeah, and that's in a way terrible, because there's I had a student in when I taught at the academy in Copenhagen many years ago, and she was really not talented, to be honest, but she was really bright. And we had this discussion, and I said, you might, why not? You're such a bright person. Why not kind of do something else? And she said, no, I want to be an architect. And she did. And then now I know she's a really, really attractive, not attractive. She's a very, I can't find the word, but I mean, she's a very good project manager.
I see.
Because she's so structured, she's so bright, she's so socially skilled. I mean, and so it was good for her to stay on. But then you need to know that there's other ways.
Yeah.
And those people keep the designers in check. Hey, stop messing around. You got a deadline.
Too many hours on that sketch. You got to move on.
Growing from 1 or 2 people at the very beginning of your office to now 85, and then coming up in size and then downsizing and so on and so forth. Leading an office effectively is like not necessarily and very different, perhaps, from being a good solo practicing architect. Did you find that it was difficult as the office grew to also take on those responsibilities of basically office leader?
Yeah, it was very difficult, and I'm a catastrophe in economy, and it's not my talent, I guess. That's also a talent, and I think that's administration and structure and contracts and all these things. I mean, I managed, but I probably wasn't the greatest at doing it, and so I think that was that's another thing that you need to understand when you. Again, there's so many skills needed in an office, and because you're a good designer, you might not be great at any of the other things, right? Some are good, some are also good businessmen, but I was never a good. I don't think I was very good at business, and so having people here that are really good at that, communication, business development. Everything around, that's important to get things moving. And so I think that's another important thing. I mean, not usually architects think that they can also be managers, and a lot of the time they're really bad managers. So.
I would tend to agree. Yeah. I was also wondering, was there? Okay, so today and for the last number of years, you're for sure a very, very successful, well-respected, well-regarded architect, successful by pretty much all metrics. But from when you started the office to now, was there a particular moment or maybe a particular project where you felt like now the office has more sure footing? I know that you're always reinventing in a certain sense, but was there a time when you're like, okay, we're on our way?
Yeah, I guess the when we won the Warden C Center, and of course doing it and building it and finishing it, I think that was important. I think getting the chance to do a building that an exhibition building, and being actually being invited for a competition like that, winning it. I think that was really important to us because, going from, building kindergartens, or, trying to, push your way into housing, or, I think that was a big step for us, that we were kind of becoming a choice in this typology. And so then we started getting invited for more competitions, and I think also the Eichfeld Center was really important for us to win that competition, and now it's finished. And but I think the Warden C Center where we stepped up a little bit, or we were given the chance after that.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering, since you are the head of a big machine, you have lots of responsibilities and people behind you in projects and all of this thing. Is there something that you do every day that somehow is something that either makes you happy, keeps you in check, keeps you sane? Like kind of like, maybe that's not about work or architecture, but just that's part of your routine.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has been, one of the things, getting older is that you can start doing things that you would never have done when you were young because you knew you couldn't be good at doing it. And so I think that, that was a long explanation. I think, I've kind of taken up sailing, and I've taken up, I together with some friends, we sing with a teacher.
Oh, cool.
Every week, and so these kind of things that you are, you're never gonna be excellent at doing, and but it's just fun to do. And I think that's a big difference from when you're 20 or 30, and you kind of, you don't want to take up things that you're not going to be the best doing. But when you get older, it's like, wow, I don't care. And, I just want to sell, and I might never win any competitions, or, so it's much more fun. And I think, starting to do those kind of things is, that is important to me.
Yeah.
That you learn new things, and you just do it because it's nice and it's fun, and it's, you see your friends, and so that's that keeps me sane.
That's really
good.
cool.
Well, you're good at architecture. You don't need to be good at sailing or singing. I think that's acceptable.
The singing, is it like a cappella? Is it like you're part of a choir, or?
Yeah, no, we are 3 good friends, and we have a teacher, and we just sing like really banal stuff like Beatles or.
Oh, cool. That's fun.
So you're going to start a band?
makes you happy. I mean, maybe dancing would be good. I guess that's that's. I mean, of course, I think one of the things that to give good advice, of course, exercise. It sounds really boring, but I think jumping on my bike in the morning instead of taking the car, and training, do that kind of stuff is really important to keep you happy. I think that I realized that more and more. So I do a lot of, I would bike with friends in the weekend or stuff like that. But it keeps me sane.
That's really cool. My final question is something that I ask all the guests is, what is your favorite work of architecture?
Wow, that's impossible, right?
That's usually the response we get.
That's an easy question.
But I think listeners have come to expect it. So
yeah,
I have so many. I mean, there's so many pieces that I admire and love. I mean, one of them is Farnsworth House. I think that's.
Oh yeah.
And I think the Carpenter Center by Le Corbusier.
Oh yes.
Or I think. It's wonderful.
It's such a strange building.
The English, is it called the building at Yale, with the Louis Kahn building?
By Kahn? The art, is it an art something? The Yale Arts, I forget.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
know what you're talking about.
No, I think, there's so many, I've become an absolute fan of Corbusier, I think, also kind of late in life, because I realized how genius and how free and wonderful he was working. I think he was a really horrible person, but the work he did was amazing. I think Eileen Gray's house at the coast of France. I have this thing with buildings from the 20s and 30s that I really love. One of my favorite houses actually is Maison de Verre.
Oh yes.
By Pierre Chéreau.
Pierre Chéreau, yeah.
Yeah, wonderful building, and and many more.
That's a good list.
It's a good list. Corbusier is an interesting person because the word you used, the kind of freedom that he had with his architecture is something. And I sometimes feel that a lot of architects become almost too rational in the work itself, and they try to like hyper rationalize everything as a way to have reason behind why it should be that way. And Corbusier's work, a lot of it was still rational, but it was just like you could not think through step by step to arrive at the solutions he arrived at. You know, there's an artist.
There was a hand in the architecture.
Yeah. It was just, and he was having fun. I mean, I think his own apartment in Paris is. I go there every time I'm in Paris, or at least some of the times I'm in Paris, because it's just so playful.
Yeah.
And experimental and wonderful. Yeah, I think Paul Rudolph is wonderful, I think too, and of course all the case study houses. I can keep going.
Is there one? We actually met with a friend a few weeks ago, and he told us that he visited a house that made him cry. It was so beautiful that he made him cry. Did that ever happen to you, that a piece of architecture would make you cry?
Yes, actually. And when I was an architecture student and I came to Venice for the first time, I was traveling kind of around Europe by myself. You know, at that time there was this Interrail tickets that you could kind of travel around for a month. And I came to Venice. It was the first time I came to Venice. I mean, Venice in itself was amazing and touching. And then I accidentally found Galleria Stampetti, Carlo Scarpa.
Oh, yes.
And you know, I went over the bridge.
Yeah.
And at that time, now they spoiled it because they changed the entrance. But you went over that beautiful bridge, and you turned around and you could walk down the steps down to the water. You know the and that touched me a lot. That was very powerful. When I go there today, I don't start crying, but at that moment, I think also Venice and the whole feeling of this melancholy was overwhelming.
It's a very special place for sure. Venice is very very unique.
Yeah.
This was awesome, Dorte. This last 2 hours flew by super quick. Thank you so much for taking the time coming on the show. It's dinner time for you, so extra thanks for the time difference.
Thank you, and thank you. It was really nice talking to you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Very, very relaxed, very easy.
Hi everyone, thanks for watching this video on YouTube. If you like what we're doing, then please support our show by hitting that subscribe button and liking and commenting on our videos.
You can also find us on most of the social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're mostly on Instagram. And you can reach out to the hotline, 213-222-6950. You can send a text message or leave a voicemail. If you have any reaction to this recording, any questions you might have, or guest suggestion, feel free to send it our way.
Cool. Thank you for watching, and see you next week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.